Please, Moon Goddess, let me be worth something before I disappear. The whisper left Emily Hart's lips at exactly midnight. So soft the snow should have swallowed it before it reached the pine trees, before it touched the frozen creek, before it rose beyond the rooflines of Silverpine Pack. She knelt beneath the old moonstone with her bare hands pressed to the white earth, her cream dress damp at the hem, her breath trembling in pale clouds. Around her, the forest stood silent and silver, every branch heavy with winter, every shadow watching like it knew how many nights she had come here alone. Broken Omega, the words still clung to her skin, colder than the snow. They had called her that in the kitchens, in the training yard, at the edge of every ceremony where unmated wolves were counted like promises and she was counted like a mistake. Emily closed her eyes tighter, not because she expected an answer, but because hope hurt less in the dark. Her wolf had never risen. Her scent was so faint that other wolves passed her by, as if she were only air. In a world where power announced itself in growls, rank, and the clean snap of a shift beneath the moon, Emily Hart had only quiet hands, a soft voice, and a heart that kept choosing kindness even after the pack taught it shame. I'm not asking to be chosen, she whispered, her fingers curling against the snow. I'm not asking to be loved. Just let me believe I was not made wrong. Far to the north, nearly 200 miles away, King Adrian Blackwood woke inside the highest chamber of Frosthold Palace. The fire beside his bed had burned low, leaving the stone room washed in blue darkness. But it was not the cold that opened his eyes. It was her voice. A fragile prayer threaded with pain had passed through wards, walls, mountains, and miles of frozen wilderness to reach him as clearly as if the girl had been kneeling beside his bed. Adrian did not move at first. Men feared him because stillness came naturally to him, because he could silence a royal hall with a glance and make proud alphas lower their eyes without raising his voice. He was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, tall, pale-skinned, broad-shouldered, and carved by duty into something colder than the legends said. Yet in that moment, beneath the weight of his black furs and silver crown resting on the table nearby, his hand tightened against the blanket. Inside his chest, the wolf that had slept in cursed silence for years stirred once. Not violently, not with anger, with recognition. Adrian turned his face toward the window, where snow pressed against the glass like 1,000 white moths. "Who are you?" he murmured. Back in Silverpine, Emily bowed her head until a tear fell onto the moonstone. The old rock answered with the faintest shimmer of silver light, so brief she thought she imagined it. She rose slowly, hugging her arms around herself, unaware that her prayer had crossed the north and found the one man every wolf in her pack feared most. Unaware that before dawn, King Adrian Blackwood would summon his guard, cancel his route to the border, and give one quiet order that would make Silverpine tremble. "Find the pack with the old moonstone," he said, his silver-gray eyes fixed on the storm. "And find the girl who prayed beneath it." Morning came to Silverpine with a thin gray light, and the kind of cold that slipped through window cracks like a secret. Emily Hart was already awake before the kitchen bell rang, standing over a basin of water gone nearly icy, scrubbing flour from wooden bowls while the rest of the pack house still dreamed behind thick doors and warm blankets. Her fingers were red from the chill, but she moved carefully, quietly, the way she had learned to move after years of being noticed only when someone wanted someone to blame. The kitchen smelled of yeast, wood smoke, and bitter coffee. It should have felt ordinary, safe, even. But after the night beneath the moonstone, nothing inside Emily felt still. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the narrow window above the sink, half expecting the silver shimmer to return, half afraid it had been nothing more than tears and moonlight playing tricks on a lonely girl. "You are staring again." The voice made her shoulders tighten before she turned. Vanessa Grant stood in the doorway wearing a pale blue coat trimmed with white fur, her golden hair arranged in perfect waves over one shoulder. She was the Alpha's daughter, beautiful in the way a polished knife was beautiful, all shine and edge, raised to believe every room should bend around her. Behind her came two young wolves, Mason Reed and Claire Bell, both smiling before anything funny had happened. Emily lowered her eyes. "I am sorry. Breakfast will be ready soon." Vanessa stepped closer, her boots clicking over the stone floor. "It should already be ready." The Alpha King's route changed before dawn. My father received the message an hour ago. The bowl slipped slightly in Emily's hands. She caught it before it fell, but not before Vanessa saw the tremor. Yes, Vanessa said softly, enjoying it. His Majesty is coming here. To Silverpine. Today. Mason let out a low whistle. Claire clasped her hands, as if this were a festival instead of a royal inspection. Emily felt the room tilt. The Alpha King was not supposed to come this soon. The pack had planned for another week of polishing silver, rehearsing bows, pretending the cracks in Silverpine did not show. All unmated women will present themselves in the great hall by sunset, Vanessa continued. Even you. Emily looked up before she could stop herself. Me? Claire laughed under her breath. Do not sound so hopeful. Vanessa's smile widened. Father says it is better to prove we are honest. If the king asks whether we hide weakness, we will show him we hide nothing. The words settled over Emily like wet cloth. She understood then. She was not being included. She was being displayed. A flaw placed in front of royalty, so the pack could say it had nothing to conceal. Vanessa reached past her and dipped one gloved finger into the flour bin, then brushed a pale streak across Emily's cheek. Do try to look less frightened tonight. Broken things are embarrassing enough without shaking. Emily stood very still until they left laughing, until the kitchen door swung shut, until the only sound was the pot beginning to hiss over the stove. She lifted one hand to wipe the flour from her face, but stopped when she saw her reflection in the dark window glass. Pale skin, tired eyes, brown hair pinned back with a ribbon that had faded from blue to almost gray. Nothing royal, nothing powerful, nothing anyone would cross a room to choose. And yet, beneath the ache in her chest, something strange remained from the midnight prayer. Not courage, not exactly. A small warmth, buried deep, like an ember refusing to die in snow. Emily pressed her palm against her heart and whispered so quietly even the walls could not mock her. Just get through tonight. But outside Silverpine, far beyond the eastern ridge, black horses were already cutting through the morning mist. Royal banners snapped in the wind. At their head rode King Adrian Blackwood, silent beneath his dark cloak, his silver-gray eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if the whole world had narrowed to one hidden girl and the prayer she never meant him to hear. By noon, the whole Silverpine pack had begun to shine in ways that felt dishonest. Servants polished the long oak tables until they reflected the hanging lanterns. Fresh pine garlands were tied around every archway. The great hall, usually loud with gossip and rank, smelled of cedar, roasted apples, and expensive candles taken from storage for the first time in years. Emily moved through it with a basket of folded linens against her hip, careful not to brush against anyone in their rush to look worthy. Every voice seemed sharper than usual. Every laugh seemed aimed before it landed. Near the hearth, Vanessa Grant stood on a wooden platform while two seamstresses adjusted the hem of her silver dress. It glittered whenever she turned, catching light like frost on a window. Alpha Grant watched from his carved chair at the head of the hall, his dark suit pressed, his expression tight with pride and worry. Silverpine was not a poor pack, but it was not powerful enough to impress a king without pretending. Emily knew that. Everyone knew that. Still, they hung banners over the cracks in the stone and placed flowers before walls that had been cold for generations. Emily, Alpha Grant called, and her name sounded less like a name than an order. She stopped at once. The hall quieted in that small, hungry way it always did when someone sensed entertainment. Alpha Grant's eyes moved over her faded dress, the flowers still faint at the edge of her sleeve, the old ribbon holding back her light brown hair. Step forward. Her feet obeyed before her courage did. The basket felt suddenly too heavy. Vanessa tilted her head, smiling as if she had been waiting for this. Father, should she really appear before His Majesty like that? No, Alpha Grant said. She will be cleaned up. But first, everyone should remember what we are presenting tonight. Emily's throat tightened. She knew that tone. It was the tone adults used when teaching children not to touch a cracked cup, useful only as a warning. Alpha Grant rose and walked slowly down the steps from his chair. The Alpha King values discipline, order, strength. Silverpine has all three. His gaze settled on Emily. But honesty matters as well. We will not be accused of hiding our weakest blood. Someone near the wall snickered. Emily held the basket tighter. Vanessa stepped down from the platform, graceful as a swan gliding over ice. Maybe she should demonstrate, she said lightly. If His Majesty asks what makes her broken, Father should have a clear answer. Emily looked at the floor. Please, Vanessa. The plea was quiet, but the hall heard it. That made it worse. Vanessa's smile cooled. Just a small shift, Emily. A hand. A claw. Even a flicker in the eyes. Surely after all these years, the moon gave you something. Heat rose behind Emily's eyes. She could feel everyone watching, waiting for the familiar failure. She tried anyway. Not because Vanessa deserved it. Not because Alpha Grant ordered it. Because some buried part of her still wanted to prove, just once, that they were wrong. She closed her eyes and reached inward for the wolf that should have been there, the other heartbeat, the wild silver soul every werewolf carried like a birthright. At first there was only silence. Then a faint pressure answered, distant and soft, like something waking behind a locked door. Emily gasped. The lantern flames shivered. For one impossible second, the ache in her chest warmed, the same warmth from the moonstone blooming beneath her ribs. Then Vanessa laughed. The sound snapped through the hall, and the warmth vanished. Look at her, Vanessa said. She really thought it was happening. Laughter rippled gently, not loud enough to be called cruel by anyone who wanted to deny it, but sharp enough to cut. Emily opened her eyes. Her hands were still human. Her reflection in the polished table looked pale and small. Alpha Grant's mouth tightened with satisfaction disguised as disappointment. Enough. Take the linens to the West Rooms. Then report to Margaret. She will make you presentable. Emily turned before anyone could see the tears gathering. She walked steadily because running would give them too much. But as she passed the tall windows, she saw movement beyond the snowy courtyard. Riders. Black horses. Royal banners. The first line of the Alpha King's guard appeared through the pines, their armor dark against the white road. The hall fell into a stunned hush. Vanessa stopped smiling. Alpha Grant went rigid. Emily stood with the basket in her arms, heart pounding so hard she barely heard the bell tower begin to ring. The king was early. The bell tower rang 3 times before anyone remembered to breathe. Alpha Grant moved first, snapping orders with a smile that had not yet reached his eyes. Coats were straightened. Silver pine banners were pulled tighter. Servants rushed toward the entrance with trays of warm cider and polished goblets. Vanessa stepped down from her platform, one hand pressed to her glittering dress, her face pale beneath its careful powder. The king was not supposed to be here until sunset. Royal visits were built on preparation, on rehearsed greetings and arranged beauty, and he had arrived while the hall still smelled of panic and fresh wax. Emily stood near the windows with the basket of linens frozen against her hip, watching the black horses cross the courtyard in perfect silence. There were 12 riders at first, then more behind them, each wearing dark armor marked with the silver wolf of the Northern Territories. At their center rode a man who made the winter itself seem to step aside. King Adrian Blackwood dismounted without waiting for assistance. He was taller than every guard around him, broad beneath a long black cloak lined in silver fur, his pale face calm and unreadable, his dark hair moving slightly in the wind. He did not look hurried. That was the frightening part. The whole pack had been thrown into chaos, but the king moved as if he had already seen the ending and was only walking toward it. Emily could not hear his voice through the glass, but she saw Alpha Grant hurry down the front steps and bow so low his pride almost touched the snow. Adrian glanced at him once, then looked past him, past the guards, past the polished doorway, directly toward the great hall windows. Directly toward her. Emily stepped back, so quickly the basket slipped from her hands. Linen spilled across the floor like fallen snow. Claire Bell gasped. Mason Reed muttered something under his breath. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Pick them up, she whispered, but Emily could not move. For one suspended second, across the length of the courtyard, the Alpha King's silver-gray gaze held hers with a stillness that felt impossible. Not curious, not amused. Searching, as if he had heard something in the silence around her that no one else could hear. Then the front doors opened, and cold air swept through the hall. Every wolf inside dropped to one knee. Emily dropped last, not from defiance, but because her legs had forgotten how to bend. The stone bit through the thin fabric of her dress. Her heart hammered so loudly she wondered if the king could hear that too. Alpha Grant's voice filled the entrance, smooth now, polished into obedience. Your Majesty, Silverpine, is honored beyond measure. Had we known you would arrive early, we would have prepared a proper welcome. Adrian's boots crossed the threshold. The sound was quiet, but the hall seemed to shrink around it. I did not come for a welcome. No one spoke. Even the fire seemed to lower itself. Alpha Grant lifted his head slightly. Then how may Silverpine serve? Adrian removed his gloves one finger at a time, his eyes moving over the kneeling pack, over jeweled dresses, lowered heads, anxious faces. He passed Vanessa without pausing, though she lifted her chin just enough for him to notice her beauty. He passed the rows of unmated women, the elders, the warriors, the servants. Then he stopped near the center of the hall. Emily kept her eyes on the floor, but she felt the weight of him turn toward the far side of the room, toward the old western corridor where Margaret Hart had just appeared with her gray braid over one shoulder and fear hidden carefully behind her gentle face. Margaret looked at the king. The king looked back. Something old and unspoken moved between them. Alpha Grant noticed it and stiffened. "Your Majesty?" Adrian's voice was low, controlled, and colder than the wind outside. "There is a moonstone on your land." Alpha Grant blinked. "Yes, Your Majesty. An old relic. Nothing of importance." Emily's breath caught. Adrian's gaze lowered then, slowly, inevitably, until it found her kneeling among the fallen linens. Someone prayed beneath it last night. The hall went so silent Emily heard one drop of melted snow fall from a guard's cloak onto the stone floor. "Bring her to me," the Alpha King said. For a moment, no one moved. The command hung above the kneeling pack like a blade made of ice, though Adrian Blackwood had not raised his voice. Alpha Grant's face changed so quickly Emily almost missed it, the polite mask slipping just enough to reveal fear beneath. Then Vanessa rose halfway from her kneel, her silver dress whispering around her like frost. "Your Majesty," she said, sweet and breathless. "I believe I am the one you are looking for." Emily's heart stopped. Across the hall, Margaret's hand tightened around the edge of her shawl. Adrian turned his head toward Vanessa, not quickly, not with surprise, but with the quiet patience of a wolf hearing a twig snap in the dark. Vanessa lowered her lashes. "I often pray at the moonstone. Last night was difficult for our pack. I asked the moon goddess for strength." A few people nodded too fast, eager to help the lie become truth. Alpha Grant stepped in at once. "My daughter is deeply devoted, Your Majesty. She has always been favored by the moon." Emily kept her eyes down, her fingers curled in the fallen linens. She should have stayed silent. Silence had protected her before. Silence had kept her fed, sheltered, overlooked. But something inside her ached at the sound of Vanessa wearing her prayer like a borrowed dress. Adrian took one step closer to Vanessa. "Repeat it." The hall breathed in. Vanessa's smile flickered. "Your Majesty?" "The prayer." His voice remained calm. "Repeat the words you spoke beneath the moonstone." Vanessa hesitated for only a heartbeat, but the heartbeat was enough. "I prayed for strength," she said carefully. "For honor. For the chance to serve the North with dignity." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. That was not the prayer. The color drained from Vanessa's cheeks. A murmur passed through the hall before Alpha Grant silenced it with a sharp glance. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. She could feel the warmth from the night before stirring again beneath her ribs, small and frightened, as if some hidden part of her recognized the king's voice and wanted to answer. Adrian turned away from Vanessa as if she were no longer part of the question. His gaze moved across the room and settled on Emily. "Stand." The word was not harsh, but it reached her like a hand extended through darkness. Emily tried to rise. Her knees trembled, and the basket tipped against her ankle. Before she could gather herself, Margaret stepped forward. "Your Majesty, she is frightened." Alpha Grant's head snapped toward the older woman. "Margaret." The warning in his tone was plain, but Margaret did not bow lower. Her gray eyes stayed on Adrian. Emily has been taught to fear attention. The hall went colder. Emily wanted to disappear. Not because Margaret was wrong, but because truth spoken aloud had a sound more dangerous than any insult. Adrian looked from Margaret to Emily, and for the first time since entering the hall, something in his expression shifted. Not softness exactly. Recognition sharpened by anger held under perfect control. "Emily," he said, and her name sounded different in his mouth. Not like a burden, not like an order, but like something found after a long search. She stood slowly. The entire pack watched as the broken Omega rose from beside the spilled linens. Her cream dress was wrinkled, her hair loosened at the temples, and a faint streak of flour still marked one cheek. She felt every flaw with painful clarity. Vanessa's beauty gleamed nearby. Alpha Grant's authority filled the room. The royal guard stood like shadows at the walls. And still, Adrian looked only at her. "Did you pray beneath the moonstone last night?" he asked. Emily swallowed. Her voice almost failed, but the memory of snow, tears, and silver light steadied her. "Yes, Your Majesty." A low sound moved through the hall. Vanessa stepped back as if the floor had shifted. Alpha Grant's jaw tightened. Adrian's eyes did not leave Emily's face. "Say the words." Shame rose hot behind her eyes. Those words had been private, the smallest piece of her soul offered to the night because she thought no one would ever hear. But he had heard. Somehow, impossibly, he had heard. Emily folded her hands before they could shake. "I said," she whispered, "please, Moon Goddess, let me be worth something before I disappear." The silence that followed was not empty. It was stunned, heavy, alive. Adrian closed his eyes for one brief second, and inside the hall, every lantern flame leaned toward Emily as if drawn by a wind no one could feel. When he opened them again, his silver-gray gaze had changed. "It was you," he said. "It was you," Adrian said again, quieter this time, and somehow the second time struck harder than the first. Emily stood in the center of the great hall with every eye fixed on her, feeling as if the room had grown too bright and too small. She wanted to look away from the Alpha King, but his gaze held her with a force that was not cruel. That was what frightened her most. Cruelty, she understood. Mockery had rules. Shame had a familiar shape. But this steady attention, this impossible certainty in his silver-gray eyes, felt like standing at the edge of a frozen lake and hearing something alive beneath the ice. Alpha Grant stepped forward with a careful laugh. "Your Majesty, forgive the confusion. The girl is impressionable. She wanders at night. She has always had strange habits, but no gift of consequence." Margaret's face tightened. Emily lowered her chin, waiting for the king to accept the explanation. Powerful men usually did. It was easier to believe in Alpha than in Omega in a wrinkled dress. Adrian did not even glance at Grant. "No gift of consequence," he repeated, and the words sounded colder in his mouth. "That is what you call a prayer strong enough to cross nearly 200 miles of winter and wake a cursed wolf from silence." The hall seemed to lose its air. Someone gasped softly. Vanessa gripped the side of her dress. Emily stared at Adrian, unable to understand the meaning quickly enough to fear it. Cursed wolf. Silence. Wake. Each word fell into her like a stone dropped through water, sending ripples through places she had kept hidden even from herself. "I did not know," she whispered. "I did not mean to disturb you." At that, Adrian finally moved closer. Not fast, not threatening. One measured step, then another, until only a few feet separated them. Emily could see the snow melting along the hem of his black cloak. She could see the faint lines of exhaustion beneath his eyes, the kind no crown could hide. "You did not disturb me," he said. "You reached me." No one in Silverpine had ever spoken to her that way, as though her presence could be an answer instead of an inconvenience. Her throat tightened painfully. The warmth under her ribs stirred again, brighter now, responding to his nearness with a soft pulse that made the lanterns tremble. A murmur rose among the pack. Mason Reed backed half a step away from her. Claire Bell pressed a hand to her mouth. Vanessa's expression sharpened with panic. "That is impossible," Vanessa said. "Emily cannot even shift." Adrian's eyes turned to her, and the hall went still at once. A closed flower is not dead because winter fails to understand it. Vanessa's lips parted, but no answer came. Margaret bowed her head, and Emily saw tears shining in the old woman's eyes. Alpha Grant looked between them, calculating, afraid of what he had failed to control. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "if the girl has caused some magical disturbance, Silverpine will accept responsibility. We can confine her until your healers examine her." Emily's stomach dropped. Confine. The word wrapped around every memory she had tried to outgrow. Locked cupboards, closed doors, orders to stay quiet, stay hidden, stay grateful. Before she could speak, Adrian removed his cloak. The movement was simple, but the effect was immediate. Every wolf in the room lowered their eyes as the Alpha King stepped toward the broken Omega and placed the heavy black cloak around her shoulders. It was warm from his body, lined in silver fur, and so large it nearly swallowed her whole. Emily froze beneath it. Adrian's hand did not linger, but the brief brush of his fingers at her shoulder sent a calm through her that was deeper than comfort, older than fear. He turned to face the pack, standing between Emily and every person who had ever called her worthless. "No one will confine her," he said. "No one will silence her." His voice remained low, but the floor itself seemed to listen. "Until I understand what the moon has hidden in Emily's heart, she is under my protection." Emily could barely breathe. Behind him, the fallen linens still lay scattered across the floor, white against stone, reminders of the life she had been standing in only minutes before. But now the Alpha King's cloak rested on her shoulders, and somewhere deep inside her, behind that locked door in her soul, her wolf opened its eyes. The words "under my protection" moved through Silverpine like a storm no one dared name. Emily stood beneath Adrian's cloak, feeling its weight on her shoulders and the warmth of it sinking through the thin fabric of her dress, while the pack stared as if the world had turned upside down in front of them. Only minutes ago, she had been the girl beside the linens, the quiet mistake, the one everyone stepped around. Now royal guards watched the exits. Margaret wept silently near the western corridor, and the Alpha King stood between Emily and the people who had taught her to lower her eyes. Alpha Grant recovered first, but not well. "Your Majesty, of course we honor your protection. We only wish to assist. Emily has been unstable for years. Her wolf has never surfaced. Her sin is faint. She is easily confused." Emily flinched at each sentence, not because it was new, but because hearing her life reduced to a report made her feel suddenly small again. Adrian did not turn around. "Then you have mistaken quiet for confusion." His voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the hall. "That is a dangerous habit for an alpha." Grant went pale. Vanessa stepped forward, desperation breaking through her practiced grace. "Your Majesty, please. You cannot truly believe she is special because of one midnight prayer. Emily helps in kitchens. She mends hems. She carries laundry. She is kind, yes, but kindness is not power." For the first time, Adrian looked back at Emily. Not to question her, to let her hear the answer with him. Kindness is the only power that does not need witnesses to be real. The hall fell silent again, but this time the silence did not feel empty. It felt ashamed. Emily's fingers curled inside the edges of the cloak. A memory rose in her mind, small and sharp. Vanessa laughing as Emily gave her last winter scarf to a child with fever, Mason calling her foolish for feeding an old stray wolf outside the storage shed, Claire whispering that Emily served everyone because no one would ever choose her. She had believed them for so long that her own gentleness had begun to feel like proof of weakness. But Adrian spoke of it as if it were something rare, something worth defending. Then Margaret stepped forward with trembling courage. "Your Majesty, there is something you should know." Alpha Grant's head snapped toward her. "Enough." Margaret did not stop. Emily's mother was not born of Silverpine. She came from a moonbound line. Healers, listeners, women whose prayers could reach wounded souls. A soft ripple passed through the pack. Emily turned toward her grandmother, breath caught in her chest. "Grandma." Margaret's eyes filled with sorrow. "Your mother hid it to keep you safe. After she passed, I tried to keep the secret buried until your gift woke on its own." Adrian's expression sharpened. "And who else knew?" Margaret looked at Alpha Grant. That was answer enough. The great hall seemed to tilt. Emily stared at the Alpha who had called her weakest blood, who had planned to display her as proof of honesty, who had known there might be more inside her than failure. Grant's mouth tightened. Old stories. Nothing more. Adrian took one step toward him, and the Alpha lowered his gaze without being told. "You called her broken because you feared what she carried." The warmth inside Emily flared. Not hot, not wild. Silver and steady, rising from beneath her ribs like moonlight filling a locked room. The lantern flames bent toward her again. Somewhere deep inside, her wolf pressed closer to the surface, no longer silent, no longer asleep. Emily gasped and gripped the cloak. Adrian turned at once, and the cold king vanished from his face for one brief heartbeat. "Do not fear it," he said softly. "It is yours." Emily closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, something within her answered. Emily did not shift in the way Silverpine expected. There was no frightening sound, No spectacle for the hall to gasp over. No wild display for Vanessa to envy or Alpha Grant to control. Instead, the change began like a breath finally released after years of being held. Silver light bloomed beneath her skin, soft as dawn through frost, tracing the lines of her hands and rising gently to her throat. The old ache in her chest opened, not as a wound, but as a door. Behind it, her wolf lifted its head. Emily felt her for the first time with perfect clarity, not broken, not weak, not missing, but patient, waiting. A quiet silver wolf with eyes like stars, curled in the deepest part of her soul because the world outside had never been safe enough to receive her. Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks, but she did not hide them. Adrian stood a few feet away, watching her as if he were witnessing something sacred. Around them, every wolf in the great hall felt the change. Heads bowed without command, shoulders lowered. Even the royal guards, trained to stand unmoved before kings and storms, grew still beneath the pull of the moon-bound light. Vanessa took one step back. "This is a trick," she whispered, but her voice had lost its shine. No one answered her. The lanterns dimmed, then brightened, their flames bending toward Emily in small golden arcs. Margaret covered her mouth with both hands, joy and grief trembling through her. Emily turned toward her grandmother, and the moment their eyes met, a memory that did not belong to Emily opened inside the silver light. Her mother standing beneath the same moonstone years ago, pale and brave, holding a newborn child to her heart while whispering, "Hide her until the moon sends someone strong enough to stand beside her, not above her." Emily's breath caught. The vision faded, but its tenderness remained. She looked at Alpha Grant, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel smaller beneath his stare. "You knew," she said. Her voice was gentle, and that gentleness somehow made the words stronger. Grant's jaw worked, but no defense came quickly enough. Adrian's gaze stayed on him, like winter settling over a field. "He knew enough to bury the truth," Margaret said, her voice thin but steady. "He feared the moonbound line would draw royal attention. He feared losing control over what he could not understand." Emily's hands trembled, not with fear now, but with the grief of realizing her shame had been taught to her by people who benefited from it. Adrian stepped beside her, not in front this time, but beside her, as if the difference mattered. And it did. "Emily Hart," he said softly, "look at me." She turned. The moment their eyes met, the warmth in her chest reached toward the cold silence in his, and the entire hall seemed to feel the bridge form between them. Adrian inhaled sharply, his calm breaking for half a second. The curse that had wrapped around his wolf for years loosened, just enough for a low silver glow to answer beneath his skin. Emily saw pain there, hidden beneath power, loneliness hidden beneath the crown, and a wolf who had been waiting in darkness longer than anyone knew. Without thinking, she lifted one hand, stopping inches from his chest, asking without words. Adrian nodded once. Emily placed her palm lightly over his heart. The silver light moved from her hand into him, not forcing, not claiming, only listening. Adrian closed his eyes. For the first time since he entered Silverpine, the hard line of his face softened. A breath left him, quiet and shaken. "There you are," Emily whispered, not sure whether she spoke to his wolf or her own. When Adrian opened his eyes, they shone brighter than before, no longer only cold silver, but alive with something fierce and grateful. He looked at the hall, then back at her. "Your prayer did not just find me," he said. "It called my wolf home." The words "called my wolf home" seemed to settle into the stones of Silverpine and change the shape of every silence that had ever lived there. Emily kept her hand over Adrian's heart for one more trembling second, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm, the ancient cold around his wolf easing like ice beneath spring light. Then she stepped back, and the silver glow softened, gathering around her shoulders like moonlit mist. No one laughed now. No one whispered broken. The same wolves who had watched her carry linens and lower her eyes now stared at her, as if they were seeing the first page of a legend they had almost thrown away. Adrian turned to the hall, his expression calm again, but not empty. "Silverpine will answer for the harm done under its roof," he said. "Not with fear, with truth. Every servant, every Omega, every child without rank will be heard by my council before I leave this territory." Alpha Grant bowed his head, all pride stripped from his posture. Vanessa stood behind him, pale and silent, her silver dress no longer shining the way it had that morning. Emily expected satisfaction to rise in her chest, sharp and bright, but what came instead was quieter. Relief. A grief finally allowed to breathe. Margaret crossed the room slowly, and Emily went to her at once. The older woman took Emily's face between both hands, the same way she had when Emily was little and frightened of thunder. "Your mother would have known you," Margaret whispered, "even before the light." Emily closed her eyes, letting those words reach the places insults had bruised for years. When she opened them, Adrian was watching from a respectful distance, as if he understood that some healings belonged first to family. Then, before the entire pack, the Alpha King lowered himself to one knee. A soft shock moved through the hall. Emily's breath caught. "Emily Hart," he said, his voice carrying without force. "I will not claim what you do not freely give. I will not turn your gift into another cage. But before every wolf here, I honor what the moon has shown. You are not a mistake. You are not a burden. You are my fated mate. If your heart chooses the bond when it is ready." Tears blurred the room, but Emily did not feel weak for them. She looked at the King of the North, the man feared by packs and guarded by winter, and saw not a savior demanding gratitude, but someone wounded who had recognized her prayer because his own soul had been praying too. She reached for his hand. Adrian rose only after she touched him. Around them, the silver light brightened once more, and this time Emily felt her wolf standing fully within her, quiet, graceful, unafraid. Outside, the clouds parted over Silverpine. Sunlight poured across the snow, and beneath it, the old moonstone in the forest answered with a glow bright enough to be seen from the great hall windows. Every wolf turned toward it, but Emily looked only at the open doors beyond Adrian's shoulder, at the road leading north, toward Frosthold, toward a life she had never dared imagine. She did not know all that waited there. She did not know why her mother had hidden the moonbound mark, or what darkness still clung to Adrian's curse. But for the first time, the unknown did not feel like punishment. It felt like a beginning. Adrian draped the cloak more securely around her shoulders and offered his arm, not to lead her away, but to walk beside her. Emily took one step, then another, past the fallen linens, past the bowed heads, past the girl she had been forced to be. At the threshold, she looked back once at Silverpine, not with hatred, but with the calm dignity of someone finally leaving a room that had never deserved her light. Then she stepped into the winter sun with the Alpha King at her side, and far beneath her skin, her silver wolf lifted its face to the north and howled without fear.